After the death of Totila from his wounds sustained during the Battle of Tagne, Teias took over the leadership of the remaining Gothic forces. However, Teias was killed in battle with Narses shortly thereafter, seemingly ending the war for Italy. The Frankish king, Theudebald, had failed to come to the aid of the Goths during their time of need. He did, however, give permission for the Alemanni chieftains, Lutharus and Budelin, to lead an expedition into Italy. Their intentions appeared to be twofold: seizing booty and prisoners, as well as aiding the Goths. Many Goths joined their forces in a bid to defeat Narses and overturn the situation. Although contemporary sources estimated the size of their armies to be around 75,000, such figures were undoubtedly exaggerated. The Frankish Alemannic forces entered the Po Valley in early June 553. Narses dispatched several commanders at the head of a considerable force to the province of Emilia with instructions to hold the invading forces until he could prepare his position. However, poor judgment on the part of one of the Herul commanders fighting on the Roman side resulted in a signal defeat at Parma, while poor logistical support from the civil authorities of the area forced the Romans to retire hastily towards Faenza. Meanwhile, Narses was able to reduce Lucca, which still held out against him. Additionally, Elijern, brother of Teias and commander of Cumae, decided to offer his services to the Roman emperor rather than support the Franks, greatly aiding Narses in his efforts. Narses decided to pull back his troops and have them spend the winter preparing for a spring campaign after the Romans were defeated at Parma. It was a wise choice that was made. The Frankish Alemannic armies made their way through central Italy without any resistance, causing destruction wherever they went. However, when they reached Samnium, they decided to divide their forces. Budelin led his troops towards Campania, Lucania, and Bruttium, while Lutharus marched across Apulia and Calabria all the way to Otranto. In the summer of 554, the army began its journey back, carrying with them a significant amount of loot. Unfortunately, they fell prey to an ambush set by the Roman commander of Pisorum, resulting in the loss of much of their treasure. By the time they reached Frankish Venetia, a disease had spread among them, causing many, including Lutharus, to pass away. The army disbanded and posed no further threat. Meanwhile, Budelin's forces were also affected by an illness, likely dysentery, but continued their march towards Rome, where Narses had established his base. Narses took advantage of the weakened Frankish forces and stalled the situation until he felt that his troops, including a considerable number of barbarian allies and foederati troops, were ready. The two armies finally clashed near Capua on the banks of the Casilinus, also known as the Volturnus River. Narses, the brilliant Byzantine general, commanded an impressive army of around 18,000 soldiers, comprising a diverse range of military units that showcased the empire's strategic depth and martial prowess. Byzantine cavalry, skilled in both ranged attacks and close-quarters combat, added a dynamic edge to Narses' forces. These warriors, adept at maneuvering swiftly across varied terrain, brought a tactical finesse to the battlefield. Complementing the cavalry were the stalwart heavy infantry, which formed the backbone of Byzantine military might. Clad in heavy armor and armed with spears, swords, and shields, these soldiers were an impenetrable wall of defense and a relentless spearhead in offensive maneuvers. Their disciplined formations and unwavering resolve made them a formidable force to contend with. In addition, Narses boasted a substantial contingent of Heruls, fierce warriors hailing from northern Europe. These warriors, led by their own commanders, brought a distinct ferocity and battlefield expertise, adding a wild and unpredictable element to Narses' calculated strategies. Their proficiency in guerrilla tactics and sheer combat prowess made them invaluable assets in both open warfare and strategic ambushes. The Franks set up camp on the banks of the river, with one side of their encampment formed by the water. Budelin cleverly used the wheels of the many carts and wagons that accompanied his army to create a perimeter for the rest of the camp. These wheels were dug into the earth up to their hubs in a continuous line. A wooden watchtower was constructed near the entrance of the camp to defend the nearby bridge over the river. This tower was strongly manned and intended to repel any potential attack from the Romans, as the bridge provided one of the few routes away from the enemy. Luckily, the absence of any significant Roman presence on the Frankish side of the river made it easy for Butulin's army to gather whatever supplies they needed from the surrounding villages without issue. Upon approaching the Frankish encampment, Narses took swift action to prevent any uncontrolled pillaging. He promptly dispatched a cavalry unit led by an Armenian officer named Chanaranges. With ease, the Franks' attempts at foraging were halted, and several wagons were captured. In addition, one wagon carrying hay was set ablaze and placed against the watchtower that had been erected to safeguard the bridge, ultimately resulting in its destruction. Fortunately, the small garrison stationed there was able to narrowly evade the danger. The events that followed marked the beginning of a battle. As the Franks emerged armed and ready to engage the Roman force, Narses ordered his troops to form up in a traditional battle formation outside his own camp. However, a disruption occurred when one of the herald leaders killed a servant in a fit of rage over a minor issue. Upon hearing of this, Narses was concerned that this could bring misfortune to the Romans and felt obligated to take action. Despite the unrepentant attitude of the herald leader, Narses ordered his immediate execution. The heralds were then hesitant to continue their deployment, but were eventually persuaded by their leader, Sinjual, to join the rest of the army. Narses accommodated them by reserving a position for them in the center of the Roman line, which they were to occupy as soon as possible. The battle plan he devised followed a conventional approach. His cavalry was stationed on both flanks, outfitted with lances, bows, and shields. Some of his soldiers, including heavily armored cataphracts, wielded longer pikes. Narses himself stood with the right wing, while the cavalry on the left flank was partially concealed in woods. They were instructed to stay hidden until they could attack the enemy infantry from the side. The Roman center was comprised solely of infantry, with archers and spearmen forming the front ranks and additional soldiers positioned in classic Roman battle order formations, as described by the 5th century strategic writer Vigedius. The heralds were assigned the task of occupying the center of this line, directly behind the foremost units. The Frankish forces received a boost when 2 herald deserters claimed that their own people had withdrawn from the battle and that Roman morale was low. Encouraged by this news, the Franks quickly adopted the Cunnius formation, which was a typical Germanic attack strategy known to the Romans as the wedge or boar's head. This formation consisted of 2 deep columns converging at the head, creating a narrow front protected by a wall of shields. Its purpose was to penetrate the enemy line, allowing the rest of the columns to engage the enemy, while the head could then turn to attack from the rear. The barbarian wedge formation surged forward with an unstoppable ferocity. The initial collision was chaotic, with Roman legionaries desperately trying to hold their ground against the relentless onslaught. Swords clashed, shields collided, and bodies fell in a grim dance of death. The barbarians, fueled by adrenaline and battle fervor, pushed forward, their sheer momentum carrying them deep into the heart of the Roman formation. Driven by their thirst for victory and plunder, they broke through the Roman line with surprising ease. As the barbarian vanguard smashed through the Roman ranks, some of their warriors broke off, charging recklessly towards the Roman camp in a mad bid for glory and riches. Meanwhile, the bulk of the barbarian force engaged in brutal close combat with the Roman center, their savage determination matched only by the disciplined resolve of the legionaries. As the battle raged on, Narses, the seasoned Roman general, observed the unfolding chaos with a keen eye. Recognizing the urgent need to contain the barbarian onslaught, he swiftly issued orders to the cavalry positioned on the flanks of the Roman formation. With a resounding trumpet call, the horsemen executed a precise maneuver, reversing their formation and wheeling back behind the Roman infantry. As they swung around to the rear, Roman cavalry archers notched their arrows, readying their bows to unleash a deadly barrage upon the exposed flank of the advancing Franks. The Franks, caught off guard by this swift maneuver, found themselves under a relentless hail of arrows from an unexpected direction. Warriors cried out in agony as the Roman cavalry unleashed a storm of projectiles. The once confident barbarian warriors now found themselves vulnerable, their flanks exposed, and their advance halted by the deadly precision of the Roman cavalry's ranged attacks. As the Franks struggled to withstand the relentless barrage of arrows from the Roman cavalry, a new threat emerged on the battlefield: the orderly advance of the heralds. These seasoned warriors charged with ferocity, their war cries blending with the clash of weapons and the screams of the wounded. The Franks, already reeling from the combined assault of the Roman cavalry's archery and the sudden onslaught of the heralds, found themselves in a precarious position. The heralds, known for their swift and aggressive tactics, crashed into the disoriented Franks with devastating force. Their disciplined formation and coordinated attacks shattered the cohesion of the Frankish column. Spears thrust, swords swung, and the melee descended into a chaotic maelstrom of violence. The attrition from the Roman mounted archery continued to take its toll on the Franks, adding to the confusion and disarray. The sheer volume of arrows, coupled with the Franks' inability to pinpoint the arrow source due to the chaotic nature of the melee, created a sense of panic and desperation among the barbarian ranks. As the leading elements of the Frankish column began to crumble under the relentless pressure, panic spread like wildfire. Some Franks broke ranks and fled behind the main Roman battle line. Others, in their haste to escape the carnage, made a mad dash towards the nearby river. The river, once a potential barrier against the Romans, now became a grim trap for the retreating Franks. Some, in their panic, stumbled and fell into the water, where they met a watery grave. Others were cut down by pursuing Roman and herald warriors. As the main body of the heralds regrouped and moved back into their designated position, a sense of order returned to the Roman ranks. The disciplined Roman infantry formed a solid line once more, their shields locked in a formidable wall of defense. The cavalry on the wings, having fulfilled their crucial role in disrupting the Frankish advance, regrouped and reoccupied their strategic positions, ready to execute the next phase of Narses' plan. Meanwhile, hidden in the dense woods flanking the battlefield, Roman cavalry units lay in wait, poised to strike at the opportune moment. Agathias, the historian chronicling the events, hints at the likely engagement of these concealed cavalry forces, as he describes the Franks as being effectively surrounded in the final stages of the conflict. As the Roman line solidified and the cavalry prepared for their next move, the Franks, now pushed into a single mass without reserves, began to feel the weight of their disarray. The once cohesive barbarian columns lost their unity and momentum, their formations crumbling under the relentless pressure exerted by the Romans from multiple angles. Within moments, the situation for the Franks became dire. Their soldiers, lacking a clear route of escape and facing overwhelming opposition, started to flee in desperation. Panic spread through their ranks like wildfire, and what had initially been a battle of strategy and skill devolved into a chaotic rout. Seizing the opportunity presented by the Frankish retreat, the Roman line surged forward with renewed vigor. The disciplined legionaries, now on the offensive, pressed their advantage with calculated ferocity. The Franks, caught between the advancing Roman forces and the encircling cavalry, suffered devastating losses. Agathia's account, while potentially exaggerated in the number of survivors, paints a vivid picture of the scale of the Frankish defeat. The battlefield, once a scene of fierce contention, now bore witness to a massacre. Narses had indeed achieved a complete victory, solidifying his reputation as a masterful commander and securing a decisive triumph for the Byzantine Empire. The Battle of Volturnus showed that well-organized infantry, supported by cavalry, was still an effective force in the Roman army. The key ingredient for success was discipline rather than any sudden change in tactics. This was evident in the battles fought during the reign of Justinian. While infantry remained a crucial part of most armies, cavalry played an increasingly versatile role. When employed appropriately, cavalry could even replace infantry in the battle line. The warfare of the later 6th century saw these developments becoming more pronounced. Narses' decisive victory marked the final triumph of the Byzantine Empire in Italy. However, the war was not over yet. 7,000 Goths held out at Campsa, near Naples, until they surrendered in the spring of 555. The lands and cities across the River Po were still held by Franks and Goths, and it was not until 562 that their last strongholds, the cities of Verona and Brixia, were brought under control.